She did not smell rain that morning. She smelt frost and wet stone and the green snap of stems cut before dawn. Fenwick Cross woke slow under a white sky, chimneys leaking coal smoke into a cold that had teeth in it, and the market square filled the way it always filled, cart by cart, breath by breath, until the bell in the old chapel tower struck 7 and the stalls came alive at once. She was the kind of woman a street forgot the moment she turned a corner. Not ugly, not pretty enough to be remembered either. 24 years old, hands red at the knuckle from cold water and thorns, a coat gone thin at the elbows and mended twice at the cuff. Tamsin Reed sold flowers from the same corner stall her father had kept before her, and her father's father before him, and she was the only one left now who knew which blooms would hold their colour through a frost, and which would blacken by noon if you did not wrap the roots in wet flannel and keep them from the wind. It was a small thing to be good at. It was the only thing she had. She wore her mother's old gloves to work, brown leather gone soft, and cracked at the seams, patched at the left thumb with a scrap of grey wool because she had never had the coin to buy new ones, and never would, not selling violets and hothouse roses to people who haggled her down to the farthing. She did not mind the patch. She minded the cold more, and the gloves kept most of it out. Every Thursday, near 9, a man came to her stall who did not haggle at all. He was tall and grave, and dressed plainly enough that she had taken him at first for a steward or a man of business, someone's agent come down from a big house to buy flowers for a mistress who never once appeared. He gave his name only once, in the first week, and never again. Mr. Thorne, he asked for white flowers. Always white. He never said why, and she had learned, in the way a person learns the shape of a stranger's silences, not to ask. He paid what she asked, and never less, and once, when she had tried to give him extra stems because his coin had come to more than the bunch was worth, he had looked at her for a long moment, with eyes the colour of strong tea, and said only, "Keep it. You did the counting. I did not." She had thought of that sentence more than she meant to. By the week's end, one of them would not come to that corner again, and nothing after would be the same. She did not know that yet. She only knew the frost, and the stems in her basket, and the ache in her hands as she waited for the market to properly wake. If a story like this one has found you this morning, it is worth staying for. Subscribe to the channel now, so you do not miss where it goes. The trouble started, as trouble in Fenwick Cross usually did, with the washing. Peg Dunmore took in laundry 3 streets over, in a narrow house that leaned on its neighbour for support, and she had a baby not yet a year old, who had been coughing since the first hard frost of the month. Tamsin knew her the way she knew most of Candle Row, by nodding in passing, by the smell of lye soap that clung to Peg's hands the way flour dust clung to her own. It was Peg's eldest boy who came running to the stall that morning, breathless, his boots too big for him and stuffed with rag at the toe. "She won't wake proper," he said. "The baby. Ma says she won't wake proper, and the doctor wants coin first, always coin first, and we haven't got it." Tamsin looked at him for exactly as long as it took to set down the rose she had been trimming. She did not think about it the way a person thinks about a decision. She simply reached under the stall-board, where a tin box held 3 weeks of careful saving toward the winter rent on her plot behind the almshouse, the plot the vicar let her keep at a fair price so long as she paid on time, every time, without fail. She counted it out into the boy's hand, all of it, every shilling she had put by since October. "Take this to the doctor first," she said. "Tell him it is for the fee, and tell your mother I will come by this evening with willow bark and honey. in case he is slow. Ma won't take charity. It is not charity, Tamsin said. It is a loan, and I am not worried about being paid back. That was of course a lie of the gentlest kind, the kind that costs the liar something and asks nothing of the one it protects. She had just given away her rent. She did not say that. She only sent the boy running, and went back to trimming stems with hands that did not shake, though the morning had gone colder. And though she now had no notion at all how she would find 3 weeks of rent again before the frost deepened and the vicar's patience, however fair, ran thin. She did not know she was watched. Across the square, in the shadow of the chapel steps, a man in a plain grey coat had stopped mid-stride on his way to her stall, a folded newspaper under one arm, and had not moved since the boy first came running. He had heard enough of it. He had seen the tin box come out from under the board, seen it emptied without hesitation, without a glance around to see who might be watching, without the smallest performance of virtue for an audience she did not know she had. He watched her send the boy off and turn back to her flowers as though nothing at all had happened, as though giving away 3 weeks of bread and shelter to a stranger's sick child was simply the next task of the morning, no different from trimming a stem. He did not go to her stall that day. He turned instead down the lane toward the doctor's house, and paid a call there himself, quietly, before the boy had even arrived, so that when the coins came they would be returned untouched, with no one the wiser as to why the fee had already been settled. She did not know then that the man she called Mr. Thorne was, in every particular that mattered to the law, and the church, and the whole of the county, the Duke of Calder. She did not know that he had watched her empty her rent money into a stranger's palm without a flicker of calculation on her face, and that he had gone home that night and sat a long while by his own fire, turning the fact of her over in his mind the way another man might turn a coin, looking for the flaw that was not there. She only knew the flowers were selling slower than usual, and that the cold had a bite to it that meant snow before the week was out, and that Thursday, for the first time in 3 months, felt very far away. The evening came down grey and early, the way it did in that stretch of the year, and Tamsin walked to Candle Row with a twist of willow bark, a small jar of honey she could not really spare, and nothing left in her tin box at all. Peg Dunmore met her at the door with a face gone soft with crying. Though the baby, she said, had finally slept, truly slept, her breathing eased, the fever broken some time past noon. The doctor had come and gone within the hour, examined the child, left a tonic, and told them, oddly, that the fee had already been paid. Paid, Peg said, still turning the word over as if it did not fit her mouth. He said a gentleman had settled it that morning, before your boy even reached the door. Would not say who. Said the gentleman asked him not to. Tamsin felt something in her chest loosen that she had not known was tight. Then keep this too, she said, holding out the willow bark and honey. In case the fever comes back in the night. I can't take more from you. You are not taking it from me. I am giving it. There is a difference, and I would rather you not stand on the doorstep arguing it in this cold. Peg laughed, wet and startled, and pressed Tamsin's hand between both of her own, red and cracked from the wash-water, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Tamsin did not stay long. She never did, on these calls. She had a horror, difficult to name even to herself, of being thanked properly, of standing in a doorway while someone tried to find words large enough for a kindness she had not done to be thanked for. She turned the compliment aside the way she turned aside every one that had ever come her way, with a shrug and a plain word, and walked home in the dark with her hands in her pockets and her breath white in front of her. She did not think of the money again that night, or if she did not let herself dwell on it. She had a stall to open in the morning, and a plot of frost-bitten ground to tend, and a rent she would somehow have to find another way to pay. She did not know, walking home under a sky gone the colour of a healing bruise, that 3 streets behind her, in a room she had never seen, a man was writing a short letter to his steward, instructing him to look, quietly, into the matter of a certain flower seller's rent on the almshouse plot, and to see that it never came due again in any way she would notice, as anyone's doing but her own good fortune. The next Thursday, Mr. Thorne did not come. Tamsin told herself it meant nothing. Men like him had business, houses, obligations that did not run on the schedule of a flower stall. She kept his usual bunch of white flowers wrapped and ready until noon, out of habit more than hope, and when he had still not come by the time the church bell struck 1, she sold them to a passing housemaid at half the price, and told herself again that it meant nothing. It was 3 days later that the vicar stopped by her stall, hat in hand, looking faintly puzzled, to inform her that the almshouse plot's rent for the season had been settled in full by an anonymous benefactor some weeks in advance. "I did not think to question it," the vicar said. "It is not the first time such a thing has happened on this street. There is a hand at work in this parish that does not care to be named. I only tell you so you are not troubled when the collection does not come round to your door this quarter." Tamsin stood very still behind her stall for a long moment after he had gone, her breath fogging in the cold, one gloved hand resting flat on the wood, as though she needed it to remain upright. She did not know then that the hand which had settled her rent, and the fee at the doctor's though she would not learn of it for weeks, a debt owed by the miller's widow, and a set of new boots left without a note on a crossing sweep's usual corner, all belonged to the same man. She did not know that he had begun, in the quiet architecture of his own household ledgers, to attach her name to a column he kept, for no one else. She only knew that something in her ordinary week had gone strange, and that Mr. Thorne, who never missed a Thursday, had missed one now, and that she minded it a great deal more than she had any right to. Winter closed its hand over Fenwick Cross properly after that, and the market thinned to those who could not afford to stay home, and Tamsin worked her stall in a cold that turned her breath to smoke, and her fingers to something barely her own, and waited, without admitting to herself that she waited, for a Thursday that would bring him back. He came back the 2nd week of December, and she knew it before she saw him, by the particular way the crowd near the chapel steps seemed to part without meaning to. The way people made room for a man they could not have named a reason for making room for. He looked thinner. There was a shadow under his eyes that had not been there in October. And when he reached her stall, he did not ask for white flowers straight away. He stood a moment, looking at the frost-bitten remains of her display, the hardy stems she had nursed through the cold with wet flannel and stubbornness, and something in his face eased, very slightly, the way a held breath eases. "You kept them alive," he said. "In this." "Flowers are stubborn if you treat them right," Tamsin said. "Same as most things, same as people." "I would not know about people, sir, I only know flowers." He almost smiled. It was a strange, unpractised thing on his face, gone as quickly as it came, and she found herself watching for it the way she might watch for a bird she had heard but not yet seen. "I was away," he said, unprompted, though she had not asked. "There was a matter that required my attention. I did not think it would take so long." "You needn't explain yourself to a flower seller, sir, no," he agreed. "I needn't. And yet I find I wish to." She did not know what to do with a sentence like that, so she busied her hands with the wrapping of his flowers, the string tied twice, the way she always tied it, and did not look up until it was done. When she did look up, he was watching her hands, not her face, with an attention that felt, though she could not have said why, like being seen for the first time in a long time by someone who was actually looking. "May I ask you something plain?" he said. "You may ask. I cannot promise a plain answer will please you. I would rather have a plain answer that does not please me than a pleasing one that is not true." She considered that. "Then ask. Why did you give that boy your rent money without knowing if you would ever see it again?" Tamsin frowned slightly, as though the question itself were strange to her, which it was. "Because the baby was sick, and they hadn't the coin, and I had it. There was nothing else to consider. There is always something else to consider. Your own roof, your own supper." "I would have found a way," she said. "I generally do. It would have been a poor sort of woman who let a baby go untreated to keep her own roof dry a season longer." He was quiet a moment, the flowers held loosely in one hand, his eyes on her face now instead of her hands. "I once knew a woman," he said slowly, "who would not have hesitated either over whether to help. She hesitated only over whether it would be seen. That was the whole of her calculation, every time. Whether it would be seen, and by whom, and what it would earn her." Something in his voice had gone flat and careful, the voice of a man walking around the edge of an old wound, without quite stepping in it. Tamsin did not ask who the woman was. She had learned in 24 years of standing behind a stall and watching people's faces, when a door was being opened a crack, and when it was being shown to her only so she could see it was shut. "Then she sounds tired," Tamsin said instead, "calculating like that. It sounds like exhausting work." He looked at her for a long moment, and this time the almost smile did not vanish so quickly. "It was," he said. "It very much was." He paid her, as he always did, exactly what she asked, and did not linger, and she watched him go with the strange, useless feeling that she had passed some manner of test she had not known she was sitting. 2 mornings later, a boy she had never seen before left a small parcel at her stall, wrapped in brown paper, no note attached. Inside were a new pair of gloves, kid leather, soft as water, sized, she would swear, exactly to her hand. She did not put them on. She wrapped them back in their paper and set them on the shelf beneath her stall board, and told herself firmly that they had come from the vicar, or from Peg, grateful and overreaching, or from anyone at all who was not the grave man in the plain grey coat, because to think otherwise was to admit she had begun. Without meaning to hope for something she had no business hoping for. The frost held through January, and the market thinned further, and life in Fenwick Cross went on in its narrow, careful way, until the day Lady Selena Thorne came to town. She arrived on a Tuesday, which was itself unusual, in a carriage too fine for the muddy square, and word ran ahead of her the way word always did, that she was the Duke of Calder's cousin, that she had come from London to see Calder Hall's neglected household properly managed for once, and that she was, by every account that reached the market stalls, a woman of considerable beauty and considerable coldness in roughly equal measure. Tamsin did not think much of it, until Lady Selena herself came walking through the market on Thursday morning, trailing a maid and a great deal of silk, and stopped, for no reason Tamsin could discern, directly in front of her stall. "You are the flower girl," Lady Selena said. It was not a question. "I am, my lady. My cousin buys from you." Again, not a question. Her eyes moved over Tamsin the way a buyer's eyes move over a horse, quick and assessing and entirely without warmth. White flowers, I am told, every week, without fail, from a stall run by a woman with hands like a scullery maid's. Tamsin did not flinch, though her hands at that moment resting on the stall-board felt suddenly very visible. "I do sell white flowers to a gentleman most Thursdays, my lady." "I could not say who else he might be to you." "He is the Duke of Calder," Lady Selena said, with the particular pleasure of a woman handing someone a fact she believes will wound. "And you did not know it. How very convenient for you to have been so charmingly ignorant." The square had gone quieter around them, in the way squares do when something is about to happen that people will want to describe later. "I did not know it," Tamsin said. "I am not certain it changes anything I said to him, or sold him, or thought of him. I have treated him the same either way. That is precisely the trouble with your sort," Lady Selena said, and her voice had gone soft and pleasant. The voice of someone delivering a cruelty in the register of a compliment. "You mistake a man's kindness in disguise for a man's genuine regard. He is grieving, he is generous to strays out of guilt, not out of any particular admiration for the stray. I would hate for you to build a house on ground that does not exist." "I have not built anything, my lady," Tamsin said. Her voice did not shake. She had trained it a long time not to. "I sell flowers. I am not in the business of building houses on gentlemen's regard, real or imagined. If you have come to warn me off him, you have wasted a journey." I never once thought myself in his way. For a moment something like surprise crossed Lady Selena's face, quickly smoothed away. "Fair is not the same as kind," she said. "You would do well to remember there is a difference, before you mistake his kindness for something owed to you." "I know the difference, my lady," Tamsin said. "I learnt it a long while before you troubled to teach it to me." Lady Selena's mouth thinned, and she turned without another word and swept back through the market, her maid trotting to keep pace, leaving behind her a silence that took the whole square a full minute to fill again with ordinary noise. Tamsin's hands, she noticed only once the woman was gone, had been perfectly steady the entire time. It was only after, alone behind her stall with the frost creeping back into the afternoon, that they began, very slightly, to shake. And she pressed them flat against the cold wood until they stopped. She did not see the Duke that Thursday. She told herself again that it meant nothing. What Tamsin did not know, because there was no way for her to know it, was that the Duke of Calder had returned to Calder Hall 3 nights prior to find his cousin already installed in the best guest chamber, uninvited, and that the two of them had spent the better part of an evening in a conversation that left them both, by its end, thoroughly unable to abide the other's company. "You cannot mean to go on with this," Lady Selena had said, standing very straight before the library fire, her hands folded with the particular composure of a woman who has rehearsed her lines. A flower seller, Julian. A girl who sells violets from a board in the mud. Think what your father would say. Think what Margaret's memory deserves. He had gone very still at the mention of the name, the way he always did, a stillness she knew perfectly well how to produce and use. Margaret's memory, he said, deserves rather better than to be invoked in defence of your own ambitions for this house. You have never once mentioned her out of love, only out of leverage. That is unkind. It is accurate. There is a difference, and I have had some months now to learn it properly. He had turned to face her then, and something in his expression had made her take a half step back, though he had not moved toward her at all. "You will not go to the market again while you are a guest under my roof. You will not speak to her again, in any capacity, for any reason. If you cannot manage that, I will have your things sent to your mother in Bath by the end of the week, and you may explain the reason for your early departure however you like. You would choose a stranger over your own blood." "I have not chosen anyone yet," he said. "I have only told you what I will not permit while you are here. There is a difference in that too, though I do not expect you to see it." She had gone, that night, to bed in a temper that did not cool by morning, and it was in that temper, 2 days later, that she found her way to the market square regardless, because a woman like Lady Selena Thorne did not consider herself bound by instructions she had decided, privately, not to respect. The Duke did not learn of the encounter for 2 full days, and when he did, from his own housekeeper, who had heard it from a maid, who had heard it from someone at the market itself, he sat a long while in his study with the account laid out before him, and felt something in his chest that he recognised, uneasily, as shame. Not shame at Tamsin's exposure. Shame that his own household, his own blood, had gone to wound a woman who had done nothing in the whole of her acquaintance with him, but tell him the plain truth, over and over, without once asking what it might earn her. He did not go to the market that Thursday. He told himself it was to let the talk die down, to spare her further attention while the town chewed over Lady Selena's visit. It was, in part, true. It was also, in larger part, a kind of cowardice he did not examine too closely, a reluctance to face what he had allowed to happen to her under his own name. He did not know, staying away, that his absence would read to her as confirmation of every cold thing his cousin had said. Tamsin did not go looking for reasons. She simply noted, the way she noted the weather, that Mr. Thorne, or the Duke of Calder, or whatever true name, belonged to a man who bought white flowers and said little and paid too much, had not come for a second Thursday running, and that the timing of his absence sat rather too neatly beside Lady Selena's visit to be coincidence. She did not weep over it. She had trained herself a long time ago, not to weep where it showed, not on the street, not behind the stall, not anywhere a passing eye might catch it and turn it into a story. She simply worked her frost-bitten flowers with steady hands, and told herself, in the plain, unsparing language she used for everything, that she had known from the first what a man of his rank could and could not afford to want. She took the gloves down from the shelf beneath her stall board that evening, turned them over once in her hands, and put them back exactly as they had been. Still wrapped, still unworn, it was Peg Dunmore, of all people, who brought her the truth 3 days later, on a morning cold enough to crack the puddles in the lane. "You'll have heard," Peg said, arriving at the stall with her basket of mended linen and a look on her face that suggested she had been waiting all morning for the chance to say what she had come to say, about the rent on this ground. And the doctor's fee. And, I don't doubt, my own boy's boots that turned up on the step in October with no note attached, and the coal that's come to half the row all winter with never a name given for it. Tamsin's hands went still over the flowers. "I have heard some of it," she said carefully. "I did not know it was all the same hand." "It's all the same hand," Peg said. "Mrs. Pruitt up at the Hall let it slip to my cousin, who does the laundry there, that His Grace has had her keeping a private ledger for years now. Quiet charities, no names attached. Half the row not knowing who to thank, and thanking heaven instead, which I suppose does the same work in the end. She said he asked particular, this last while. that a certain flower seller's rent be seen to before it ever came due, and that it be done in such a way she'd never trace it back to him. Tamsin stood very still, the cold forgotten, the flowers forgotten, her whole attention narrowed to the plain fact Peg had just laid in front of her like a bolt of cloth on a counter. Why would he do such a thing, she said, and then stay away? That, Peg said, not unkindly, I could not tell you. But I'd guess it isn't because he doesn't care, Tamsin Reed. I'd guess it's rather the opposite, and a man like that hasn't the first notion what to do with caring that plain. Tamsin did not answer. She stood behind her stall a long while after Peg had gone, turning the gloves over in her mind the way she had turned them over in her hands, and did not sell a single flower until well past noon. He came to Candle Row himself, 3 evenings later, without warning, without a carriage, on foot in the dark with his collar turned up against the cold, and found her at her own door with a lamp in her hand, about to bar it for the night. She did not step back. She held the lamp a little higher instead, so the light fell full on his face, and said nothing at all, which he seemed somehow to have expected. "May I come in?" he said. Not to stay, only to say what I ought to have said weeks ago, and did not have the courage to say to your face. You have never lacked for courage with me before, sir, or should I say your grace? Something in his face flinched at that, the first flinch she had ever seen in him. Either will do, he said quietly. Neither is quite the truth. She let him in. Her cottage was small, 1 room and a loft above it, warmed by a low fire she kept banked through the night to save on wood. And he stood just inside the door, as though uncertain he had the right to come further, his hat in his hands, his eyes moving once around the room, the mended linens, the single chair, the small bundle of dried lavender hung to cure above the hearth, before returning to her face. "My name is Julian Thorne," he said. "That much was never a lie. What I did not tell you is that I am also the Duke of Calder, and that the man who bought white flowers from you every Thursday for 3 months did so first for his own grief, and then, before very long, for reasons that had nothing at all to do with grief and everything to do with you." Tamsin set the lamp down on the table between them, very carefully, as though it might shatter if she moved too fast. "You watched me give away my rent money," she said, "that first morning, before you ever bought a single flower from me that mattered. I did. You did not say anything. You let me think it a kindness that went unnoticed." "I wanted it to go unnoticed," he said. "That was rather the point. I have spent a good part of my life surrounded by people who perform their virtue the moment they believe someone worth impressing is watching. I wanted to see what a person did who believed no one of any consequence was watching at all. You gave that boy every shilling you had, and then you went back to trimming roses as though nothing had happened, and I have not been able to stop thinking of it since. So it was a test. It began as one. I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not insult you by pretending I regret it, because it showed me something true, and I have had precious little truth handed to me in my life without a bill attached." He set his hat down on the table beside the lamp, a small, deliberate gesture, as though laying down something heavier than a hat. It stopped being a test very quickly. It became, instead, the thing I looked forward to more than anything else in a week I otherwise spent buried in ledgers and obligations that meant nothing to me. I stayed away these last weeks because my cousin came to insult you under my own roof's authority, and I could not face you without facing what my own blood had done in my name, and I am ashamed of that, not of you, never of you, of myself, for the cowardice of it. Tamsin looked at him a long moment, her hands folded in front of her, steady, though her heart was not steady at all. "I do not want an apology dressed up as a confession," she said. "I want to know plainly what you are asking of me, if you are asking anything, and I want you to understand that I will not be rushed into an answer for the sake of your comfort or mine." "I am not asking for an answer tonight," he said. "I would rather have your no given freely, in your own time, than a yes you gave me, only because a duke stood in your doorway and you did not know how to refuse one. I will ask again in the spring, if you will let me, and your no will be exactly as safe with me then as it is tonight. I only wanted you to know the truth of who has been buying your flowers, before another week went by with you believing less of me than I have earned, or more. I could not say which frightens me more. You could have written a letter. I could have. I did not think you the sort of woman a letter deserved to be handed to. I thought you deserved to see my face while I said it, and to throw me out of this house, if that was what the truth earned me." She did not throw him out. She stood a long while in the low firelight, weighing him the way she weighed everything, plainly and without hurry, and when at last she spoke, her voice was steady. "Sit down, Your Grace," she said. "You are letting the cold in, standing there deciding whether you are welcome." He sat. The spring came slow to Fenwick Cross that year, the frost lingering into March, but it came, as it always did in the end, and with it came a Thursday warm enough that Tamsin worked her stall without gloves for the first time since October, her hands bare in the thin new sun. Julian Thorne, Duke of Calder, came to the market that morning, as he had come every Thursday since the night in her cottage. Openly now, his rank no longer a secret from anyone in the square, though he still bought the same white flowers, still paid what she asked, still lingered longer at her stall than any errand required. "You said you would ask again in the spring," Tamsin said, before he had said a single word, because she had grown tired, over the long winter, of waiting for other people to open doors she was perfectly capable of opening herself. "I did say that. It is spring. It is," he agreed, and something in his face, grave as ever, had gone soft at the edges in a way she had come to know well. "I have been trying to find the courage to walk over here all morning and ask it properly, and you have gone and asked it for me instead." "I did not ask anything, Your Grace. I only observed the season." "Then let me observe it back to you." He reached into his coat and drew out, not a ring, not yet, but a small paper parcel, worn soft at the corners as though it had travelled in his pocket some while. "I will not ask you to answer today, if you would rather have more time. I would rather have your no freely given than a yes given, because you felt the weight of my asking. But I would like you to have this, whatever you decide." She opened the parcel. Inside were the gloves, the same pair, kid leather, soft as water, still folded exactly as she had left them on the shelf beneath her stall-board months before. "You kept these," she said. "I asked the boy who delivered them to bring them back to me, the week you left them unworn. I did not know then if I had any right to hope you would ever put them on. I have carried them since, waiting for a day I thought I might ask you plainly, instead of in riddles and disguises." Tamsin drew off her old gloves, finger by finger, the brown leather soft and cracked and patched at the thumb, and set them on the stall-board, and picked up the new pair, and drew them on, finger by finger, in front of half the market and every soul in it who cared to watch. "I do not need time," she said. "I have had a whole winter of it, and I have spent every week of it deciding the same thing over and over. I would rather be married to a man who tells me the truth late than one who tells me lies on time. Yes, it is the only word I have needed since the night you sat down in my cottage instead of standing in the doorway, deciding whether you were welcome. He took her bare hand then, ungloved beneath the new leather at the wrist where she had not yet fastened the last button, and kissed it once, gently, in front of the whole square, which had gone, by then, entirely silent to watch. "Then I accept your yes," he said gladly, "and I promise you nothing grand in return, except that I will not lie to you again, about anything, for as long as either of us lives." "See that you don't," Tamsin said. "I have not the patience for a second winter of it." They were married that June, quietly, in the same chapel whose bell had rung over the market every Thursday of her working life, a duke's wedding made grand only by the fact of who stood at the altar, rather than by any display he insisted upon, because he had learned, by then, exactly what she thought of display. Lady Selena Thorne did not attend. She had been sent, some weeks before, to make an extended stay with an aunt in Bath, a stay that lengthened, quietly and by mutual understanding, into something nearer permanent, and her letters, when they came, went largely unanswered, and eventually stopped coming at all. Peg Dunmore's youngest, the baby whose fever had begun the whole of it, grew into a sturdy, loud, entirely healthy child who called at Calderhall's kitchen door so often that Mrs. Pruitt, the housekeeper who had kept the Duke's secret ledger of quiet charities for years without ever once being asked to explain it, took to keeping a jar of sweets on the sill expressly for her visits. The crossing sweep, whose boots had appeared without a note, grew tall enough to take a place in the hall's stables, and never did learn, for certain, who had put them there, though he had his suspicions, and kept them politely to himself. A year on an evening in late autumn, with frost just beginning to silver the garden path, Tamsin sat by the fire at Calderhall with her husband's hand in hers, bare, both of them, the new gloves long since worn soft and comfortable with use, hung now on a hook by the door for gardening, rather than kept wrapped in paper on a shelf. Somewhere beyond the window, in beds she had planted herself the previous spring, white flowers still bloomed late into the season. Stubborn against the cold, exactly the way she had always kept them. "Do you ever wonder," Julian asked, watching the fire rather than her, "what would have happened if I had simply told you who I was, that first Thursday, instead of letting you think me a steward with more coin than sense? I expect I would have thanked you very properly, and been embarrassed the whole time, and you would have learnt nothing at all about who I was when I thought no one of consequence was watching." She turned her hand in their fingers lacing, and did not let go. "You would only have learned who I was in front of a duke. That is not the same woman, and I do not think you would have married her half so gladly." He did not answer that. He only tightened his hand around hers, and did not let go either, and outside the window the white flowers held their colour against the coming frost, the way they always had, because someone had troubled, long before any of this began, to learn exactly how to keep them. A person's worth is never proved by what they do in front of an audience. It is proved by what they do when they believe there is no audience at all. If this story stayed with you, the way the quiet ones sometimes do, subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you when it comes. I would love to know, in the comments, which moment struck you hardest. The morning she gave away her rent without a second thought, or the evening she found the courage to draw on those gloves in front of the whole market before she had even given him her answer. Tell me where you would have set the story down, if you had been the one holding her basket of frost-bitten flowers that first Thursday morning. Until the next one finds you, Take care of the small kindnesses nobody sees. They tend to matter more than the ones that do.